In 1913, an aircraft emerged from the fog of St. Petersburg that was so massive, many engineers assumed it wouldn't fly. Built by Igor Sikorsky, it was the first four-engine airplane in history. It was originally designed to be the height of commercial luxury. The massive fuselage housed an insulated passenger saloon with wicker chairs, a private bedroom, electrical lighting, and aviation's very first airborne toilet. But within a year, the outbreak of World War I intervened. The plush interiors were stripped out, and Sikorsky's luxury cruiser was heavily modified into the world's first purpose-built heavy bomber. It could carry up to 800 kilograms of explosives and was retrofitted with 5 millimeters of thick armor plating. Sikorsky even added a tail gunner position, a defensive invention that had never existed before. Enemy fighters quickly learned to avoid the bomber entirely, unable to pierce its armor or navigate the violent turbulence generated by its four massive propellers. Sikorsky needed a name for this flying fortress. For a Russian inventor building a machine defined by its absolute indestructibility, there was only one logical namesake: the most celebrated knight in Slavic folklore, Ilya Muromets. According to the ancient oral poems of Kievan Rus, Ilya Muromets was the ultimate bogatyr, a heroic knight-errant. But unlike other legendary nobles, Ilya was a peasant, a true son of the soil. His origin story is pure mythology. The epics say he spent his first 33 years completely paralyzed, confined to the stove in his village. Then, wandering pilgrims arrived, ordered him to fetch water, and miraculously cured his legs. Imbued with superhuman strength, he set off to defend the realm, famously capturing a half-bird woodland monster known as Nightingale the Robber. For centuries, historians filed these stories strictly under folklore. Ilya was viewed as an inspirational fiction designed to comfort everyday people during long winters and brutal wars. That historical consensus held firmly until 1990, when a team of forensic scientists was granted access to the ancient, sacred cave network beneath the Kiev-Pechersk Lavra Monastery. They opened a specific tomb to examine the relics inside. What they found inside shattered the boundary between mythology and fact, proving that this immortal fairy tale character was actually a flesh-and-blood human being. The medical researchers expected to uncover the fragile remains of a typical medieval ascetic monk. Instead, they found the skeleton of a giant. At 177 centimeters, he was a giant for the 12th century, with a thick skull and massive upper body muscles. Examining his lower extremities solved the legendary 33-year curse. Undeniable evidence of severe childhood polio left his legs completely paralyzed. Unable to walk, he had spent decades molding clay and performing heavy manual labor from a seated position. He built such extreme upper body strength to compensate for his useless legs, and this sheer muscular development eventually allowed him to regain mobility in adulthood. The myth of a miraculous sudden infusion of superhuman power is entirely grounded in biology. His strength was the physical result of adapting to a crippling disability. Once he could walk, he fought. The bones are a ledger of a brutal military career, displaying healed fractures on the ribs and collarbones from heavy spear thrusts, along with deep gouges from sword strikes. He didn't fight mythical half-bird creatures. He fought the Polovtsians, a terrifying, highly mobile nomadic cavalry from the steppes that constantly raided Kievan Rus. During a disastrous military campaign at the Kyala River, Ilya suffered a devastating wound. Escaping the battlefield, he fulfilled a vow he had made upon his recovery, trading his armor for a habit to become an ascetic monk in the Lavra. He lived in peaceful isolation until 1203, when the Polovchans breached the gates of Kiev and stormed the monastery. Watching his abbot fall to an enemy blade, the aging monk broke his vow of peace, picked up his broadsword, and fought back. The forensic examination revealed exactly how his life ended: a fatal spear thrust directly through the heart. His legendary invincibility was an illusion, but his heroism was real, forged in immense human sacrifice. Following his death, his story was adopted by traveling minstrels. They passed the tale from village to village through epic oral poems called bailini. Through decades of retelling, the grim realities of his life were embellished. Poliato became a dark curse. Nomadic raiders evolved into supernatural monsters, and his timeline was deliberately shifted back 2 centuries. This shift placed him squarely in the court of Prince Vladimir the Great. Storytellers were actively compressing history, dropping their greatest modern defender into the romanticized golden age of Kievan Rus to create a unified national mythology. By stripping away the 12th century politics, the physical limitations, and his very human death, the oral tradition refined a mortal monk into a timeless, indestructible archetype of the Russian spirit. Which brings us back to 1913 and Igor Sikorsky searching for a name for his massive new aircraft. Sikorsky saw a perfect parallel. Just as the ancient peasant overcame childhood paralysis and brutal battle trauma, this multi-engine machine was built to sustain heavy fire, shrug off damage, and keep flying. Both the monk and the machine embody the exact same concept. They represent a power that may lie dormant or seem vulnerable for years, only to rise up with overwhelming, unstoppable force when the homeland is threatened. The legend of Ilya Muromets shows us how history operates. Human willpower and sacrifice can echo so loudly through the centuries that they eventually materialize as physical steel in the sky, proving that our greatest myths are often just amplified echoes of our very real struggles.